Okay, so a couple of years ago, I saw this video about how to fake an interest in woodworking, and I just want to do a similar thing along those lines, how to fake an interest in bicycling. And similar to what he said, it's not like trying to deceive anybody, it's how to be interested in the things other people are interested in. It's sort of like some Dale Carnegie shit. I'll try and throw a link into the description to that video because it's really good if you want to fake an interest in woodworking. But let's get into talking about bikes, and you'll be able to talk to people that know bikes and make friends with people who are cyclists. All right. Okay, so the first thing we'll talk about is what types of bikes there are. You're going to want to be able to identify and ask people what other types of bikes that they have, because a lot of times they'll just be riding one in an event like a road bike or something. So you're going to see them with their nice road bike, okay? And that's their nice bike, right? You're also going to have potentially, nowadays they call them gravel bikes. But a lot of people like me might call this a touring bike or a long haul trucker. Okay. People might have a racing bike, especially for that. People might have a fixie, or that's slightly different but related to single speed bikes. Um, People will often have a mountain bike or beater bike, right? That's what a lot of people actually have, but um, more serious cyclists will get a much more expensive mountain bike. Maybe even a fat tire is the new thing. Okay. And then people may have some number of vintage bikes. I have two actually. um, and that's, you can say, oh, what other types of bikes do you have? And people will go through their whole list, and a lot of times they'll have six or seven of them if they're really into biking. So that leads us directly into some of the jargon. If someone's got a racing bike, then they might have a cat. Okay, and that's not like a meow cat. That's like 1 through 5, and also 6. Okay, so if somebody tells you that they're cat 4 or cat 3, that's their racing category. Okay, and if you want to joke with them because you're not an elite bicyclist, you say you're cat 6. Okay. Um, there's also things like Peloton. Okay, that's just like people riding in a group is all that is. Easy, right? You got your kit. Okay, you might think that's a kit. That's not what that is. British people especially are guilty of calling kit. This is clothes. Okay, right? Cloths, clothes, whatever. So we got clothes. That's called kit. People might say things like uh, they might say gear set. They might say group set. Okay. Gear set and group set. The group is technically all of those extra components like the gears and the brakes and stuff. Okay. And that gets us into things like drifters. Okay. These are shifters and brakes that are all kind of combined into one thing. So you push the brake lever in order to shift gears, and you pull it in order to brake. And then I've got something on a bike that I'll show you called bar cons. It's slightly different. And then there's also there's really cheap stuff. If you don't have brifters or bar cons, right? That's the expensive stuff. Then you got something cheap, probably. Um, Maybe thumb shifters. And then the other big thing is what type of clipless pedals. Now this is real confusing for new cyclists because people will say they're clipless pedals, but they will say they are clipped in, which is confusing. And all that means is that they originally invented clipless pedals in the 80s, and before that, a clip was actually a funny pedal like this that your shoe, here's your shoe or whatever, your toe would come in and you'd clip into this part and it would actually come around with a cage like that. Now, some people get confused here because there's a flat pedal system like this where you can actually connect what's called a rat trap to it. And these are flats with a rat trap. That's different than the old clip, right? So it gets confusing pretty quick. There's only a few types of clipless pedals, but that gets us into gear, okay? So gear, people talk about things like, is it Cervelo, okay? People talk about whether it's SPD or Crank Brothers, that's what I use, or Speed Play, right? Or Look. These are all pedal types, and this is dollars going up, okay? And then there's your kit, which may include your things like your helmet, stuff like that. That's going to be the more generic. There's a wide range in price there too. You can get maybe a cheap jersey for $20. We'll look at that too. Jerseys, they go from $20 up to $200. Okay, so if you see certain things, like somebody's using Speed Play and they have a Cervelo and they have a crisp, expensive jersey, that's probably a dentist. You're going to want to ask them to take their biking gloves off so you can look and ask them how much their biking gloves were, and then you can see if they have a ring on their finger, okay? All right, so let's look at some of the gear that I prefer, some of the things that you can figure out for yourself. First thing you're going to want to figure out is to get a pretty nice pump. I've had this one a good amount of time now. The first pump I bought was really cheap. If you spend less than 20 bucks on a pump, you're going to be going back and buying a $60 to $80 pump later. Okay, and this is another one of those bits of jargon. All good bikes, they don't use this Schrader valve thing. They use Presta, okay? So one side's Schrader, one's Presta. All the nice bicycles use Presta. If you see somebody in a bike race with a Schrader valve, they don't know what they're doing, okay? They're not going to know any more than you, so they're going to be safe to talk to. All right, now this is a key piece of equipment that you need for a bike. I'll show you how to use this on my bikes. This probably cost me $5. It's just a stamped piece of steel. And you see these two numbers on here. This helps you figure out how worn your chain is. As long as you replace your chain every time it gets worn, then your bike will last a lot longer. I also have out the stick. Okay, if you're going to be doing any amount of bicycling, you're going to want something like this. Okay, your muscles start to hurt, and you rub this on yourself, it feels better. I just used it yesterday. I was desperate for it. And the problem with bicycling is, people will try to give you these foam rollers, but you can't use a foam roller on your quads, right? You got to use something like this on the top of your leg. That's the part that hurts. All right, so I bought this helmet, cost me 20 bucks, 30 bucks, 10, 15 years ago. It used to say Live Strong on it. I took all those letters off till it said Tron. You're going to want to rip off the visor that comes with your helmet because that just gets in the way and causes drag. You'll notice that you want these vents. That's good. But because there's vents, you get a bee will fly in and sting you. So I always wear some kind of a hat underneath that, okay? They make these bike hats. They look kind of fun. and jaunty. You don't want to wear this unless you're either drinking coffee at a coffee shop while riding a bike, or if you're like riding a bike and they used to just wear these. That was all. They keep your hair, in place or whatever. Now, biking gloves, those can be very expensive. These, $5 probably, weightlifting gloves. They got this nice leather going on. If you don't use these, I'm telling you, your hands can hurt. If you fall off the bike and you brace yourself with your hand, you can get a wicked abrasion on your hand, right? You don't want to do that. So these are a must. I wear these every single time I ride. Let's talk about chains, all right? So you get yourself a shitty towel. Get yourself some Bow Shield. This is an aircraft lubricant, okay? Boeing makes this. This is the best. It's the easiest to work with. It's cheap. It lasts forever. You spray it on. You wipe it off. I use the same towel for years at a time, and it gets nasty like this. If you want to talk to people about what lubricant they use, that can be really interesting. Sometimes people say weird shit. I know a guy who takes his chain off and he soaks it in paraffin wax on the stove, and then he gets it back on his bike. He loves it. All right, let's talk about shoes. These were so cheap. These are one of the best things I've ever bought. These are the MT 23s. Okay, these have lasted me 10 years. You put your pedal cleat in there. This is the Crank Brothers cleat. You can see how much I've worn it over the years. I've had that cleat. That cleat's got 5,000, 6,000 miles on it. Okay. These are DZRs. These are much more expensive. They're not that much. They're like $100, $150 at most, something like that. With these kind of shoes, you can pretend like you're a normal person. You're not wearing weirdo bike shoes all day. Okay, so if you work in an office or something, right, you can still clip in and you can still walk around and look like a normal person, right? It's sort of secret, right? So this kind of recess is only really going to work with either SPDs or Crank Brothers. That's what they're designed for. It's probably not going to work so well with things like Speed Play or Look. You probably don't want to use Look. Listen, Look pedals, a lot of people use them. They're real annoying. These little cleats are so much better to use. You can see I've even got there's a little shield there that allows the pedal mechanism to hit without damaging the bottom of the shoe. I got these. They're metal on this one. See that? Anyway, these are great shoes. This is a great company. So that gets us to some of the kit, right? We're talking about spending hundreds of dollars on jerseys. You don't got to do that. Every time there's some kind of race that you spend $100 on, you can get like a jersey, or you can even buy. This might even I think I went to this event, and it was last year's jersey. All right, sometimes you can get cool team jerseys. This is like you can ask somebody if they know certain teams or if they follow certain teams. You can talk about who's juicing or whatever. So be careful which team jerseys you buy, because people will want to talk to you about it. This is Eddie Merckx. He's like a really famous guy. And then the really cheap stuff is this Nishiki brand. You can see this. You get this at Dick's Sporting Goods, and it's great. It gets you through the day. It gets you started. And then that's what brings us to bike shorts. Bike shorts are tricky because they're not very modest, right? So they're real tight and stuff. These are actually bike underwear. That's what I like to do, is wear bike underwear, and then I throw on, these are excellent. These Wranglers shorts with some zippers. That's excellent. You hear my dog in the background. But I throw these on top of any bike shorts, really, whether it's bike underwear or just some bike stuff. And then I can go in the store and not feel like a freaking weirdo. And then you can ask people like what type of brands they like. People love talking about all that. Like, what do you guys are you wearing bike shorts right now underneath your shorts? And they'll pull up their shorts and show you, oh yeah, I'm wearing this, I'm wearing that. And Then the nice thing is you basically never have to wash these, right? The other thing to ask cyclists about is like what they do for nutrition. Always say nutrition. Don't say protein. That'll out you. But if you say nutrition, cyclists are always talking about that, like which type of protein powders they use. Are they getting any additional supplements? Like, oh, you can say, oh, I've been using creatine. I make sure to add extra magnesium. They'll talk to you about that forever, right? Let's go look at the bikes. Forgot to mention, here's another hack, okay? If somebody has sunglasses and they look really nice, okay? That's probably a dentist, okay? That's another thing. These were a few dollars. These are safety glasses. You can buy these in a pack of 3 or 5 or whatever, and they're real cheap, okay? The actual bike sunglasses are like hundreds of dollars, okay? So when you see like colorful things and it's like designs across the top and on the side, that's somebody with money, okay? That's a dead giveaway. You can ask them, oh, where'd you get those glasses? And people love talking about something they spent a lot of money on, right? But get yourself these. They're the key to any glasses. Always make sure it says somewhere on there, and I think these say it here, ANSI Z87.1, which that means if like a rock gets kicked up from a truck or something, you're not going to get your eyeball. Right, let's talk about a real bike. I've got my daughter's cheap Walmart bike here for comparison. The first thing you notice about a nicer bike is somebody's going to have their clipless pedal system on there. This is Crank Brothers. It's the same as SPD, but I like it because you don't have to adjust anything. When you have the SPDs, you got to adjust the tension on these. These are made out of aluminum, and they've lasted me probably 10,000 miles. These are the Candy egg beater pedals, which means that they have this extra housing that helps you have something to stick your foot on when you're not in bike shoes, okay? You'll also notice this is a nice thick piece of metal here. This is gonna be really strong component wise. And you can kind of get a sense a little bit also just in terms of how strong this is compared to a really cheap bike. The big thing to talk about with bikes is what's the frame made out of, okay? So when you see this, that's probably a bike nerd. That's someone like me. If they like steel, they say steel is real, okay? This is the 2014 Navara Randonnée. It's meant to be a long-hauling bike, touring bike. And that means that this frame has a particular geometry for touring to make it comfortable. It means the forks, this is the rake and trail of the fork. So you could say to somebody, oh, that looks like a really severe rake on your fork if it's really curved, right? Or it might be really straight. So an adult's road bike almost always has, these are 700 circumference wheels, okay? And then there's two numbers. It'll say, this 622 means it's 700. See, don't ask me why. And this other number is how wide the tire is. Okay, so this is a 32 wide tire this way. And 622 is how big around it is this way. And then there's also how many spokes it's got. Because this is a touring bike, that means it came with extra spokes in case they break. So you can actually fix it right on the road. This is your front derailleur, and this is your rear derailleur. Okay, these are French words or whatever. And then oftentimes with a bike like this, you want to get a rack because then you can keep all kinds of tools and stuff. You're going to want, these tire levers are really critical. You're going to want a pump. These multi-tools are really useful, really nice. They're real cheap too. I always like to carry an extra adjustable wrench and one extra with these kind of hex wrenches, okay? And then you keep a spare tube so you can fix your flats. You can keep an outfit in here too, which is nice. Okay, I got spare gloves, I've got first aid kit, got tire patch kit, and I've got, somewhere in here I've got a knife, there we go. Swiss Army knife. You're going to want to have one of those. And then this little pouch you can oftentimes keep like a lock or some food in or something like that. The other thing to say about a bike is to make sure you've got a bike seat that fits you. So you're almost always going to want to replace whatever seat came with your bike. This is really key. This is the cheapest odometer that money could buy. There's a wire that goes down and attaches here. Okay, and then there's a magnet right there. And every time it hits, it calculates how fast you're going. It gives you an odometer. So you can see right now my bike's got almost 600 miles on it. Actually, I've replaced the battery on this a few times. This bike has almost 6,000 miles on it. I've been through 4 chains so far, which actually, let me show you how to check your chain wear. This is the best way to look really knowledgeable if you're going to buy a used bike from somebody. If you're going to a bike shop to buy a used bike, bring one of these with you. Go to the 50 side. You just pop that right on the chain. And if it doesn't fit, it's not worn. So if this little tab fit in there, it's worn to that much. Then you can flip it around and check 75% worn. Some of these have, I like to have a 50 and a 75, because if it's more than 75, just replace the chain. But sometimes they're 75 and 1. And if it's a 1, it's really worn. So something about the way each one of these gets a little more worn, and it stretches the chain. So if you show up with one of these and you check in the chain and it's really worn, that means that these gears and these gears might also be really worn and someone wasn't taking care of that bike. So the other component to look at real closely is the brakes and how they work. This has standard brake levers, and these are the bark-on shifters. So this shifts gears and this just brakes. If this had brifters, you'd push this in. This is more of a mountain biking brake style, which if you're used to really cheap bikes, this is the type of brake you see on really cheap bikes, right? This bike, this has got the brifters, okay? So you push just this part in, and that shifts you one way, and you push both in, and that shifts you the other way, and you can brake with it too. So this has been a really good bike. This Liv is a Giant's brand of bikes. Giant is a type of bike maker. And as usual, we've got Presta instead of Schrader. We've got, actually, I wonder if her chain is wearing out at this point. This has been used a lot. Let's see. Trying to do this backwards through the wheel so I don't have to move it. Nope, that's still a good chain. Not fully worn yet. With women, generally they're almost always going to love these gel seats, because a lot of times women just, their seats, it's hard to get them to fit. You see, this is a good set of brakes. Okay. And it's got this release on it to let you more easily change out your wheel with your quick release levers. Okay, so don't forget that that's there if you need to change your tire. You'll see once again, these are 700 almost all bikes are 700, and then this is the thickness. And they always say C, I don't know why. And on this bike, I would never go to 120. I would go a little under. A lot of times running 5 or 10 psi under whatever it's rated for is gonna keep you from getting like a heat explosion on the tire. Sometimes tires get real hot in the sun all of a sudden after being pumped up to their max. This is my cheap mountain bike. But it lets me show you a couple things. If somebody tells you they have a mountain bike, you can ask them, does it have lockout forks? And what that means is that it lets you make these stiff so it's easier to pedal. And the other thing you can ask is if it's soft tail. And soft tail is some jargon meaning that the back has some kind of suspension in it or something. Okay. So when it comes to mountain bikes, you're always just asking really two questions. How thick are the tires? And what kind of suspension it has. Okay. This is a Trek bike. Trek is the kind of bike, it could be $200 or $10,000. So you never know with Trek. That may or may not be a dentist. This is my hanging upside on the side of there. We've got two bikes. This is the green one is a glow-in-the-dark fixie with deep V wheels. Okay, so if somebody has a fixie, ask them if it glows in the dark. Ask them if it's got brakes at all. I have brakes on mine with time trial levers, just because I prefer that. But my fixie also has my Crank Brothers pedals on it. And it's got a flip-flop hub that could do a freewheel on one side and fixed gear on the other side. And when you use a fixie, you always want to have foot retention, okay? It's actually really difficult to ride fixie. If you're in a city, then it's real flat, that's when you would want to ride it. This other bike is my racing bike. If somebody's got a racing bike, you want to ask them what it's made out of. This one's titanium. This Lightspeed is a great type of triathlon time trial type of brand, okay? So you could say something like, oh, I have a titanium bike. What kind do you have? Or whatever. You could lie. It doesn't matter. And then sometimes you can ask them if they have a different fork. So this is a racing bike, and it's got a graphite fork. It's like a carbon graphite composite. So if you're at a challenge ride and somebody's got a bike like this, one of the things you can ask them is if they've ever rented Zip wheels. That's the really expensive stuff. If somebody has Zip wheels, they're probably a dentist, okay? And as usual, you just stick with the same type of pedal on every bike, and you don't have to worry about it. And then you just want to have one bike for the winter, or for groceries or whatever, right? With nothing, just flat. So then you can just wear regular shoes if you don't feel like it. Getting out, whatever. Okay, so this bike is meant for tricks. It's also chromoly. This is a steel frame. Okay, steel. Chromoly is like a metallurgical gimmick. Okay, it's what all of the steel frames are made out of, and it's also butt welded, meaning there's no lugs. So what they would do is they would have these lugs that are braze welded on older bikes. Then eventually they were making aluminum bikes. That's what this is. And then they started making titanium, but that didn't last long in the racing world until they started making carbon. I don't have any carbon bikes because I'm cheap and I'm worried about carbon cracking and being sad about it. So here in my wood shop are my vintage bikes. Every cyclist, you can ask them if they have any vintage bikes, if they're working on any vintage bikes. This is an old 10-speed from the 80s. And you can see the lugged construction I was talking about. That lug allows the tubes to actually slip in to each other. But other than that, it's a regular 10-speed, okay, which means 5 in the back, 2 in the front. That's the old thing, okay? They don't make bikes like that anymore. You can even see this had the style of pedal that was meant for the old clip-in pedals. And then the other thing I've got here is a 1950s Raleigh commuter with the really old style frame, the really old style brakes that just pulled You can see that. Those brakes pulled up. They haven't made bikes like that in a long time, but this is kind of cool to see because it has such a severe rake on it and such a severe angle on the head tube. They don't really make them this way anymore with that kind of angle. A lot of times what they'll do now is they'll pitch this top tube. This top tube part will now be pitched down a lot more on modern bikes. And it used to be that the length of this down tube, the seat tube right here, was roughly the same as this tube here. So bike fit was all about this length here. But nowadays I'm hearing that this tube is shrinking, and that doesn't necessarily tell you a bike size anymore. But one of the reasons that it's changed is because they're making this part stronger now. And I've had bikes before where this part, if the seat post is sticking out too far, it would actually cause a bend in this tube, or it would actually damage this tube right here. That's one of the more sensitive parts on a bike. But if you see a bike where this part conforms to the wheel, okay, that's probably a dentist, okay? So that's somebody with a lot of money, all right? Anyway, good luck biking and have fun.